Welcome back to the channel Hex Tribe. In this video, I'm going to be answering a question that a lot of you have probably asked in the past, and that question is PulseX liquidity farming worth it? Is liquidity providing worth it? Is it profitable? Is it going to make you money? Guys, I'm going to answer this question, so stick around till the end, because over the past 3 days, I did an experiment with my own fake testnet money, and I wanted to determine for myself, is this actually going to be feasible in the long term? So stick around till the end, because I'm going to draw my own conclusions based off my own experience with testnet, and take this with a grain of salt, because all these values right now are not real dollar values, okay? So nothing I'm saying in this video is going to be based off a real dollar value. Things can change drastically in the real world when the Pulse Chain mainnet goes live. But at the end of the video, you're going to get some valuable insight into whether or not you might want to try this yourself, and you'll get my genuine thoughts about how I really feel about this whole thing. So guys, to start off, you're going to go to the Pulse Chain testnet for V3. The link is in the description below. It's app.v3.testnet.pulsex.com. I know it's a mouthful, link down below. But really quickly, guys, before you provide liquidity at all, you need to go to the liquidity tab over here. It's under the trade section of the website. Go to trade, click liquidity, and you're going to see there's no liquidity positions available right now. Basically, it's a two-step process. You have to provide the liquidity on the pair that you want, and then you have to stake that liquidity over in the LP farm. And LP just stands for liquidity provider. So my liquidity position is already staked over on the liquidity farm. But for a new person starting out, it's just a simple two-step process. You just click some buttons. I'm going to walk you through it right now. Add liquidity, right? And you can add any currency to any other currency. And remember, when you're adding liquidity, you need to add both sides of the equation. So for the PulseX PLS pair, for example, we need to add some PLS, and then we need to add an equal dollar value of PulseX, okay? Or an equal ratio at least. And right now, for the demo purposes, PulseX PLS is the only pair available for liquidity farming. Liquidity farming just means, how you're actually able to make money and make INC token out of your liquidity positions. Liquidity farming is how you monetize your liquidity position the most, okay? So that's what we're going to use for the example, PLS and PLSX. Really, really simple, okay? We're going to choose PLS on one side, PulseX on the other side. And you can see here, guys, by adding liquidity, I'm going to earn 0.22% of all trades on this pair, proportional to my share of the pool. So if I own 1% of all the liquidity pool, I'm going to make 1% of all the fees. And all the fees on every transaction are 0.22% for each transaction. Now, with thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of transactions per day, this really does add up. Just look at Uniswap. Just look at the fees over there. Uniswap is regularly one of the top gas-consuming applications over on Ethereum. So it generates tons of fees every day because it does billions of dollars in volume per day. And PulseX can get up there one day too. In a couple years' time, PulseX might be at that level that Uniswap is today. But we got to start somewhere, right? So I'm going to be earning 0.22% of all trades just by putting this liquidity up and receiving my PLP position in return. What does that look like? I'm going to show you right now. Let's say I want to put up 100 Pulse tokens. Well, you can see that the screen automatically calculated the equal ratio number of PulseX. So because the ratio between Pulse and PulseX is 2.63 PulseX for every 1 PLS, well, the way PulseX as a platform works is that I need to put up an equal ratio or an equal dollar value at the end of the day of each coin on each side. Which means if I want to put up 100 PLS for liquidity, I need to put up what's called symmetrical liquidity. I need to put up what that exact 100 PLS is worth in PulseX terms on the other side of the equation. So you need to have both coins, okay? That goes without saying. So if I want to put up 100 PLS, I have to put up 263 PulseX on the other side. And you can see down here, my share of the total pool is 0.01% or less than that, because this is really almost nothing. Okay, it's just for an example. Click supply, and this is the amount of PulseX PLS pool tokens that I'm going to get. These pool tokens simply represent my stake in the overall liquidity pool for this particular pair. Does that make sense? So these pool tokens don't have a dollar value. They just represent my total share of all the pool. It's a way for the math behind the scenes to keep track of how many fees you get. Because if I have this many pool tokens and somebody else has, 10,000 liquidity pool tokens in this particular pool, obviously they should earn more fees than me because they put up more liquidity than me. So don't worry about how all this math works out. It's all done on the back end through the smart contract. You're just going to confirm supply down here, wait for that confirmation, and the transaction should again be dirt cheap and less than 10 seconds because that's the beauty of Pulse Chain. Now I recommend too, you can always add this to MetaMask. It makes it easier to track. So just click this little button right here to add your PLP to MetaMask and close that out. And we'll just wait a couple of seconds for the transaction to confirm. There we go. Transaction receipt happened about 10 seconds later. We'll go over to MetaMask just to show you guys, and you can see that I've got my test PLS, my PulseX, and my new PLP liquidity position. So with this PLP alone, I'm already earning trading fees, which means if someone's buying Pulse using PulseX, they're going to have to pay a tiny bit of PulseX fees, and that's some of that PulseX fee is going to get routed to my PLP position. On the other hand, if someone's buying PulseX using PLS, they're going to have to pay a tiny fee of PLS. So you pay the fee in whatever token you are using for your swap. So again, if I'm swapping Pulse for PulseX, I pay my fee in PLS, and some tiny little bit of that PLS, 0.22%, gets divvied up and routed to all the different liquidity providers in this decentralized network. All right, that's how it works. So remember, just from PLP alone, just from holding this liquidity position, this Pulse liquidity position, PLP, just by holding these coins, I'm collecting fees. I'm collecting fees in the form of both PLS and PLSX. Now, if I had a Hex PLS pair, I'd be collecting fees in Hex and PLS. You collect fees in whatever two tokens that you chose to add liquidity for that pair. And you can always go back to the screen, right, and just verify the LP tokens in your wallet. You know, I've got 162 of these PLP tokens, and the pool that I entered was the PulseX PLS pool, all right? This is just a way to reference what you already have. Now we can go back to this liquidity and see, here it is again, right here. I've pooled 263 PulseX, 100 PLS, and that gave me 162 PulseX PLS PLPs. I know it's a mouthful, guys. A lot of P's and L's. So just try to follow along with me, okay? It's kind of hard to say PLS, PLSX, PLP over and over again. But here we go. Okay, so now I told you already, I'm already earning fees for doing this. I'm already earning fees in the form of what? PLS and PulseX, right? But now people talk about liquidity farming, right? What is liquidity farming? It's just putting your PLP to work for you, okay? So earning fees is great on its own, right? Earning fees is all you can do on Uniswap, but with PulseX, you can do one more thing. You can stake your PLP, and you can earn rewards in the form of INC token. So I'm already earning fees, but I can go ahead and go to the Earn tab over here, go to Earn, and then click Farms. It's very self-explanatory. Stake your LP tokens and earn incentive token. So I can stake that LP token that I already have, I can earn incentive token, and you could see over the past 3 days, I staked 17,000 PulseX LP tokens, and so far I've earned 0.031 INC token. Now, is this good or bad? Well, obviously it should go without saying it's better than nothing, okay? It's better than just sitting on my PLS and earning fees, so I'm just doing one more thing to earn one more token. Why wouldn't I do this? If I'm already providing liquidity, why wouldn't you just stake it in this farm right here? Because you know, gas fees are almost zero. You have almost nothing to lose by just staking it there if you already decided to put up your tokens for liquidity. But guys, I want to be clear. This experiment that I ran for myself a couple days ago, to get these 17,000 tokens, these LP tokens, what did I have to do? Well, what I ended up doing was I put up 10,000 PLS to start, and then I put up 29,693 PulseX on the other side. This is what I started with. 10,000 PLS, 29,000 PulseX. That gave me a total of 17,000 PLPs, okay? And we're going to go through this together. I'm going to end my liquidity position today and show you guys what I ended up with, okay? What did I end up with in terms of PLS and PulseX if I want to withdraw this liquidity position? If I want to harvest this INC, which means pull this INC out into my wallet and then end my PLP position, let's go ahead and see what I end up with, all right? We'll click Harvest right here. That button is simply going to just route that INC that I earned over into my MetaMask wallet. All right, and remember, an easy way to just add that coin to your wallet, guys, is you go back over to the Trade tab, go over here, go to INC, and we're just going to click this little mask icon, this little Fox MetaMask icon. Click on that, and that'll automatically add the token with the nice little symbol here, nice little logo, to your wallet. So you can now see all the tokens you have in your wallet. And you can see right here, just on the screen in front of you, that I've got 0.03189, whatever, INC token, which is great. Now, what is an INC token in Hex terms today? Let's find out, okay? one INC token is worth about 20 hex. So maybe we could estimate that if hex was still 7 cents, guys, then one INC would be 20 hex, which would be 0.07 times 20. It would be about $1.40, okay? And I've only got 0.03 of those, so times 0.03. I earned about 4 cents from INC token in the past 3 days. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but INC token could be very volatile. It could go up a whole lot. It could go down. I don't know what the price of INC is going to be in reality, but hey, 4 cents over 3 days, and you're really supposed to be staking these LPs for a longer time frame. 3 days is not that long. But it's not going to be linear either. It's not going to be as simple as, okay, well, if you made 4 cents in 3 days, then you're going to make 8 cents in 6 days. It's not linear like that. It's not that simple, okay? The INC rewards have to do with a bunch of things, pretty much just all the trading volume going on, all the math behind the scenes. So if there was more volume going on, if there was more activity on this testnet, because guys, I started this liquidity position a couple days after testnet launched, after the initial hype wore down. And so there's not too much activity going on relative to what's probably going to be going on the mainnet. But if there was more activity, I would probably stand to make a little bit more INC. So this is all going to change, is what I'm saying. In a real, genuine market, in a real trading environment, all these numbers are going to be real. It's going to be a lot more activity, and this might seem to look a little bit more attractive, okay? But hey, 4 cents for 3 days for staking, a couple dollars worth, hypothetically. Guys, the testnet values don't have any real value, but I didn't really put up that much money to start with. Remember, how much did I start with? Only 10,000 PLS and only 29,000 PulseX. Assuming PLS launches at a price of roughly $0.0001 per PLS. That means I basically only put up $1 of PLS and $1 worth of PulseX on each side. Again, these are not real dollar values, but theoretically, for putting up only $1 of liquidity and getting 4 cents over the past 3 days, starts to seem a little bit different, doesn't it? Starts to seem like, well, did I just get 4% APY during the past 4 days? I got 4 pennies on my $1. I guess it would be $2, right? Because I put in $1 of Pulse, $1 of PulseX, and I got 4 cents back in return. So if you do the math, the ratios start to seem a little bit more attractive, don't they? Now, obviously, that's not the real price. I have to say this over and over again because people get confused. None of these prices are real. I'm just ballparking here, okay? If I just put in a very, very small amount of liquidity to test, let's say in reality this would have been like $1 worth of Pulse and $1 worth of PulseX, and I'm earning 4 cents in INC rewards over 3 days. Guys, sounds pretty good. So I made 4 cents over 3 days for putting in 200 cents. That means I basically made about 2% APY over 3 days, which means I basically made about 0.7% APY daily. 0.7% APY daily, guys, over the course of the whole year. That's 243% APY, okay, if you just do the math on that. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work exactly like that. These values are volatile. They fluctuate day to day. But when you look at things from a purely percentages perspective, from a ratio perspective, and when you calculate the actual APY, earning 0.7% APY in the form of INC token over every single day is pretty good, okay? But there's risk, okay? It's not all going to be a smooth ride, okay? There's not just a free lunch over here. There's definitely a catch to this, and I want to explain that, so listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The concept I'm about to demonstrate to you is impermanent loss, all right? Essentially what that means is when I want to pull my liquidity position out, I'm going to be left with a different amount of PLS and a different amount of PulseX than I started with. And that's going to depend on all the people that traded in the past 3 days during my little experiment here. Now, I'm going to guess that people probably were buying more PLS and selling more PulseX. So what I'm assuming is going to happen is I'm going to probably end up with less PLS and more PulseX, which seems okay if you like both of those coins. That's great. But if PLS is the one that skyrockets in dollar value and PLSX dumps in dollar value, you're basically going to be ending up left with holding more of the less expensive coin and less of the more expensive coin. That's what impermanent loss is. Let me demonstrate it to you right now. We're going to go ahead and go back to this farm, and we're going to pull out this whole liquidity position and see what I get. All right, moment of truth here. So I ended my PLP stake, and then I go back over to the liquidity tab. Remember, because you stake the liquidity, but then you have to actually remove the liquidity from over here, from the trade tab, go to liquidity. And I can remove this right now, but right here it shows me how much I already have. Now remember I put in a very tiny bit earlier just to test, but what have I ended up with after my initial start of 10k PLS and 29k PulseX? I ended up with 28k PulseX and 10.7k PLS. Now, if we just subtract the initial tiny bits I did as a demo, so subtract that 100 PLS I put in and that 263 PulseX that I put in, I'm basically left, guys, with an additional 619 Pulse and a loss of 1,732 PulseX. Now, this is very interesting. Obviously, it's only the testnet, and a lot of people are doing a lot of weird different stuff. So my impermanent loss right here that was recognized when I ended my liquidity, when I removed this liquidity position, my impermanent loss right now would be 1,732 PulseX. But my gain would be 619 PLS. Now, if PLS is the one that ends up going up in price, that's actually pretty good. But chances are, in reality, what does that mean? If in this case, everybody wanted to trade their PLS for PulseX, that probably means, in this theoretical example, PulseX was the one that might have gone up in USD value more, and thus I am left holding less of the one PulseX, in this case, that went up in value, and more of the one PLS that perhaps went down in USD value. Now, this is all just ratios. Again, there's no dollar values, but this is the example of impermanent loss. The reason it's called impermanent is because it's not permanent until you remove the liquidity position. So if I remove this, all of a sudden it just becomes a loss, a permanent loss, okay? So I can remove this right now and I can get all these coins back. But look, guys, I've got less PulseX than when I started with, and I've got a little bit more PLS than when I started with. And that's because other people are trading in and out of these two coins using your tokens that you let them trade with. So you're basically letting other people trade using your coins, you and thousands of other liquidity providers. But you got to be ready for the uncertainty of, well, what if I end up with less of one coin and more of another coin? You better be happy, if you're going to be a liquidity provider, with being happy with whatever amount of both coins. So you better like both coins in the pair, is what I'm saying. If you're going to be a liquidity provider, you better be happy ending up with more of one coin and less of another coin. Now, in this case, PulseX, I like both of these tokens. This doesn't seem that bad, that drastic. And don't forget, I ended up with some INC token too. Really, I ended up with almost 0.7% APY, which is pretty remarkable, kind of. Now, we're going to remove this liquidity token, or this liquidity position, rather. Going to remove it all and just demonstrate how that works, guys. It's simple. You sign a transaction, then you remove it. I'm going to go ahead and close this transaction. And yep, everything is nice back in my wallet, just like it should be. So we're going to go out, and now we're starting from square one. No liquidity, fresh start, good as new. So that is the example right here, guys. Remember, I put in 10,000 Pulse to start, 29,000 PulseX to start. I pulled out 10,700 Pulse, and I pulled out 28,200 PulseX, okay? My impermanent loss was realized when I ended my liquidity position, and it was realized by resulting in me having less PulseX and more PLS. Now, if you like PLS more than PulseX, that's great. That's a good thing for you. But you're gambling. You're betting on which coin is going to be more popular, and you're going to end up having less of the more popular coin and more of the less popular coin. I hope this makes sense to you, because it's really not for everybody. And to be honest, guys, looking at this from a bird's eye view, if you don't have over, a couple $1,000s to really be investing here, it's really not worth your time to be playing around with these silly liquidity games. You'd be better off just buying and holding the tokens. All three tokens that you like: Hex, PulseChain, PulseX, maybe other ones. Okay, I'm not here to tell you which tokens to buy, but just be wary that it's not just a straight ticket up, okay? It's not a surefire bet that when you're providing liquidity, you're automatically going to make money. If these coins had US dollar values tied to them, I would have probably realized a loss in some way. Now, granted, I did make a nice INC reward. I made 4 cents off of a $2 investment over 3 days. All estimations here, guys. All estimations. I theoretically, if Hex was still 7 cents in this scenario, if, and that's a big if, okay? Nobody can say for certain about any of this, but if Hex was still 7 cents, then the INC reward I would have gotten over the past 3 days would have been 4 cents. And if PLS was $0.0001, then roughly the amount of dollar value that I put in would have been $2. So when I say I made 4 cents off of a $2 investment, these are the assumptions I'm making, guys. I'm assuming a lot here, so don't just take this verbatim. You have to really think critically about this. You have to really weigh all your pros and cons here. Now, is this a good idea for larger players? It might be. It might be, especially if you are trying to, for example, maybe get rid of one coin in favor of another coin, and you believe, or you guess, that the coin that you want is going to become less popular. So if you want the less popular coin, you're taking a gamble here. And remember, you can't do asymmetric liquidity. All right, this is not Uniswap v3. You need to put up an equal amount of liquidity on both sides of the equation. So it's not like in Uniswap v3 where if you wanted to sell Hex, A sneaky way you could actually sell hex would be to set hex on single-sided liquidity at, let's say, like 20 cents. That way, when people go up into your range, you're essentially selling them hex effectively. It doesn't work like that in Uniswap V2. Now, this is actually way better for price pumping, in my opinion, okay? And it makes things way simpler from a user's perspective, from a liquidity provider's perspective. But if you don't feel comfortable with this, definitely don't do it. And if you wouldn't be okay with losing some of one of these tokens, right? If you put up some Pulse and PulseX and you wouldn't be okay with ending up with less PLS and more PulseX, you don't know how things are going to work out. You can't guarantee that people are going to prefer one coin or the other. You're just guessing on which coin you think is going to be more popular and maybe using that to your advantage, right? So in this example, if I assumed that more people were going to want to swap their PLS for PLSX, and I wanted to end up with more PLS, this scenario would have been great for me. It would have worked out because I would have gotten more PLS and less PulseX, and that would be okay because I'm happy with having more PLS, maybe because I predict that that's going to be the more valuable token in the long run. But long story short, guys, when you are a liquidity provider, you are short volatility. You don't want a lot of crazy price volatility. You want prices to be as stable as possible, and you're long volume. You want a lot of volume and not a lot of price movement, because the more price movement you have, the more you might be upset with the fact that, okay, now I have all this pulse, but it was PulseX that went up super duper high. Now, in reality, I do believe things are going to be the opposite of this testing scenario. I do believe that I would guess that if I put up Pulse and PulseX liquidity in real life in the mainnet, I'd probably end up with less Pulse and more PulseX, and Pulse would probably be the one that went up in price. That's just a guess, okay? I'm just guessing like everybody else. But if you're smart and you're thinking long term, and you're thinking, well, if PulseX is going to pump in 4 or 5 more years, and everybody in Pulse Chain, PLS token, is going to be the star of the show for the first year, maybe I'm okay with that quote-unquote impermanent loss for now, because I'll end up with maybe less PLS, yeah, maybe more PulseX, great. Yeah, maybe PulseX is less valuable right now, but in 3 or 4 years' time, maybe things start to skyrocket. So you really have to think long-term when it comes to liquidity providing, and it's a guessing game, okay? There's no surefire wins, and if all this is too complicated for you, just don't even do it. You're probably going to be better off just buying and holding the tokens anyway, all right? But if you feel like you have to do something with your coins, if you just aren't okay with just sitting on them and letting the price go up and to the right over time, over years of time, if that's too hard for you, for whatever reason, maybe liquidity providing is something you could do. Also, I do think it only really will start to matter with higher dollar values. I think for someone with a couple $100 coming in, risking all your impermanent loss on these liquidity games might not be the best thing for you. So just make sure you're smart enough to know what you're doing when you're getting into this, and realize that you're going to end up with less of one token and more of another token. Yes, you're going to make platform fees, and those platform fees might actually make up for all your impermanent loss over a long enough time scale. But this is a long-term thing as well. Just like anything worth it in crypto, this is a long-term thing. If you're thinking you're going to come in and provide liquidity for 3 days and make some kind of crazy profit, you're dead wrong. Okay, it doesn't work like that. And it could work against you if one of the tokens in your pair skyrockets in price, where the other one stagnates or goes down in price. Okay. Now, I think Pulse and PulseX are both going to go up in price. Therefore, I do think this liquidity pool is relatively safe compared to other ones, because look, they're probably both going to pump. And so I might not even care that I lost, 1,700 PulseX and gained 619 Pulse. Also, over a couple of months, all the transaction fees that I'm making might offset this to the point where I could potentially have positives on both sides. I could potentially make PLS and PLSX if I let those trading fees accrue for a long enough time scale. I only did this for 3 days, guys. 3 days isn't enough to offset this impermanent loss that I've currently experienced, all right? So that's the conclusion here. It really matters which pair you pick, because like I said, you don't want a lot of volatility. You don't want the price of one coin to completely run away from you relative to the price of the other coin. The reason I'm saying the PulseX pair looks pretty okay is because they're both going to rise, but what you want to see in reality, what you want to see out of the PulseX pair is you want to see the ratio between those two be relatively stable. Let's say the ratio of Pulse to PulseX bounces around between, let's say, 2 and 3. Let's say it bounces between 2 PulseX per PLS and 3 PulseX per PLS. And it kind of ricochets in between a range. That would be the ideal situation for you as a liquidity provider, because, that basically means these ratios are locked together in tandem. the USD value is probably going up, and you don't really have to be concerned so much as long as it doesn't go from, let's say, 2 to 1 to all of a sudden, 15 to 1. That would be bad for you. So, like I said, you're short volatility. You want these two tokens to be locked in a range, and I think there's a good chance that particularly Pulse and PLSX will probably stabilize in between some range-bound ratio. You want a range-bound ratio, and you want to look for coins whose ratios are probably bound within a range. For example, if you decide to provide liquidity on, let's say, Hex and, this shitcoin of the month, well, Hex can go ahead and pump to the moon, and your random little coin can get totally wrecked. And then guess what? You just offered up your Hex for everybody to sell into, and you just offered to take everyone else's, poop coin off their hands. And now you got a whole bunch of poop coin, and you don't have any Hex left. And now you're sad because Hex is up at the moon, and you're just jealous because you're stuck with all this poop coin, and you're watching all the people partying on the moon. But for a pair like PulseX, what I'm saying is you need to try to find these pairs that are likely to kind of be locked in a ratio. Nothing is going to be stable and flatlined, obviously. Nothing is going to sit totally still. But if you start to notice, the PulseX pair equalizing at whatever ratio, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, could even be 1 to 1. I know that'd be crazy, but it's probably going to be more like 2 or 3 to 1 or something like that. Those are the pairs you want to look for because you don't have to worry about the fact that you are left with less of one coin and more of another. And like I mentioned earlier, this part is very, very important. If you're locking your liquidity for a long time, for many, many months, the platform fees that you generate from both coins will actually start to accrue so much that it can make up for any impermanent loss. You might end up earning so much PulseX and PLS that when you pull your liquidity position out, you just have a net gain on both coins. That's a real possibility, but again, that doesn't happen from just locking it for 3 days like I did. So in conclusion, is PulseX liquidity providing good or bad? Is it going to make you money? Is it going to lose you money? Come on, guys. You really think it's that simple? Nothing is black and white here. There's no yes or no answer. Now, what did I just say? It depends on a couple of things. In conclusion, liquidity providing may be a good idea if you pick a pair that you realize or you expect to be bound within a range in terms of the ratio between that pair. If the ratio of Hex to PLS is 20 to 1 and it fluctuates between 25 to 1 and then goes back down to 20 to 1, and if you notice that, for example, the Hex PLS pair is kind of range bound in between a certain ratio range, then yeah, it's probably a good idea. And yeah, over a long time, it doesn't really matter which coin you end up with more or less of because the platform fees will make up for any coin that you might have less of. And again, if things work out really well and you pick a very tightly locked coin, who knows? If PulseX and PLS are tightly locked between a ratio of, let's say, 2 to 1 and 4 to 1, if they're very tightly locked and it bounces back and forth, you might not have any impermanent loss at all. And you might end up with a whole bunch of fees and INC token and make a whole bunch of money. 240% APY, right? That was a rough calculation. But if you're making 0.7 ROI per day, again, that's just based off my quick tests, but that's a ton of money. That sounds like a pretty good idea. But if you pick the wrong pair, not a good idea. You could lose a bunch. Also, if you're playing around with smaller dollar amounts, and if this is all brand new and scary to you, you're totally fine just sitting on the sidelines, buying the coins, watching the tokens go up. I'm sure a lot of liquidity providers on Ethereum wish they would have just bought the coins and held. And I'm sure there's a lot of liquidity providers out there that deeply regret their decisions. So be savvy and just educate yourself before rushing into this. Watch the markets, watch the ratios, and make a careful decision about which pairs you want to liquidity provide for if you want to do it at all. So be warned, this is how you do liquidity providing. I hope this made sense to you. I hope you learned something. Guys, if you're brand new to crypto, I do have a course out. Or if you just want to collaborate with me and ask me questions, Patreon, link in description below. You're going to get a lot more of my personal one-on-one attention, all your questions answered personally if you join my Patreon group, okay? There's not enough time in the day to support everybody, but I hope videos like this taught you something new about crypto and how decentralized finance works, how PulseX works, and I'm really excited for the future, guys. I wish you the maddest of gains, and I'll see you in the next video.